The phone rang just as I was about to sink into the couch with my favorite book. I glanced at the caller ID. Daniel. Sighing, I answered, "Hey, what's up?" "Laura, while you were away, I moved my parents' stuff in." Daniel's voice, casual and unapologetic, hit me like a thunderclap. "What do you mean?" My heart raced, and I sat upright, abandoning my book. "I told you we should have them live with us. They're here now." I felt the room spin. "Daniel, we never agreed on this. How could you decide this alone while I'm visiting Uncle John?" Daniel scoffed. "Come on, Laura, it's not a big deal. Besides, I figured you wouldn't mind." Mind? The audacity of his assumption left me speechless. This house, our home, was suddenly invaded by his unilateral decision. "Daniel, we need to talk about this." "No need, just stay there a bit longer. Honestly, it might be better if you don't come back at all." His words stung, a cold dismissal that echoed in the now silent room. I had always known Daniel was headstrong, but this blatant disregard for our partnership, for me, was a new low. "All right then, Daniel." "If that's what you want," I replied, my voice steady, belying the storm inside. There was a pause, a moment of uncertainty. "You're okay with this?" "Yes, Daniel. I guess it's time for me to move on anyway." The call ended abruptly, leaving me alone with my thoughts. For a moment, I let the hurt wash over me, the pain of being so easily discarded. But then, a flicker of resolve sparked within me. I remembered the plan Uncle John and I had discussed, a contingency for just such a betrayal. I reached for my phone again, my fingers deftly composing an email to a contact who could set our plan in motion. As I hit send, a sense of empowerment surged through me. Daniel thought he could easily upend my life, but I wasn't going to let him have the last word. The house we shared, it was more than just walls and a roof. It was the embodiment of my dreams, my efforts. Daniel might have believed he could just push me out, but he was in for a surprise. Uncle John's advice echoed in my mind. "Always be 2 steps ahead, Laura." I started packing my things, each item a memory, a piece of the life I thought I had. But as I folded my clothes and gathered my belongings, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. I was no longer the naive girl who fell for Daniel's charm. I was Laura, strong and capable, and I was about to show Daniel that underestimating me was his biggest mistake. I closed my suitcase, my heart steady and my mind clear. It was time to face what was coming, and I was ready. I left the house under the cover of dawn, the first light casting long shadows on the path that had once led me to a shared dream. As I drove away, my mind wandered back to the days before Daniel, before the disillusionment. I had always been a bit of a dreamer, finding solace in the quiet corners of life. Growing up in a modest home with loving parents, I learned early on the value of hard work and the joy of simple pleasures. My mother, a talented home cook, had instilled in me a love for nutrition and healthy living. Her sudden passing during my teenage years left a void, one that I filled by immersing myself in studies, eventually leading me to become a dietitian. College was a blur of textbooks and late-night study sessions, but it was at a college reunion that I met Daniel. He was charismatic, the life of the party, and when his eyes met mine, I felt a spark that I had never experienced before. Our whirlwind romance was like something out of a fairy tale, and before I knew it, I was walking down the aisle, promising to spend my life with him. Our early days of marriage were filled with laughter and love. Daniel, with his job in marketing, seemed to be the perfect counterpart to my more grounded nature. But as the years passed, the laughter faded, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Daniel's charm had masked a deeper, more unsettling trait, his obsession with status and wealth. His comments on my salary, once infrequent, became a constant refrain. "You'd think a dietitian would earn more," he'd say, a sneer in his voice. I brushed off these remarks, focusing instead on our son, Alex, who was growing into a thoughtful and intelligent young man. Alex, much like me, found his father's materialistic views troubling. He had ambitions of going to a top university, dreams that I wholeheartedly supported. Daniel, however, seemed more concerned with how Alex's choices would reflect on him rather than on what was best for our son. It was during one of our heated arguments about Alex's future that I realized how far Daniel and I had drifted apart. He needs to aim for a prestigious college, Laura. It's about our family's reputation, Daniel insisted. But it's Alex's future, Daniel. Shouldn't we support what he wants? I countered, frustration evident in my voice. Daniel's dismissive attitude that night was a turning point for me. I knew then that something had to change, and so I found myself confiding in Uncle John, my mother's brother, and a wise confidant. It was he who helped me see the importance of standing up for myself and Alex. Together we devised a plan, a way to ensure that no matter what Daniel did, I would be able to protect my son and myself. As I drove towards Uncle John's house, the rising sun casting a warm glow over the horizon, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was not just a retreat. It was a step towards a future where I was no longer a bystander in my own life. It was time for Daniel to see that the quiet, unassuming Laura he thought he knew was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who wouldn't back down. Uncle John's home was a sanctuary, a place where I could gather my thoughts and plan my next steps. And over cups of steaming coffee, we sat at his old oak table, plotting. Uncle John, with his years of experience in law and a keen understanding of human nature, was the perfect ally. "You need to think about the long game, Laura," he advised, his eyes serious. "Daniel thinks he's outsmarted you, but we'll turn the tables on him." We discussed various strategies considering legal and financial aspects. Uncle John suggested transferring certain assets to my name and documenting all of Daniel's actions, should the situation escalate to legal proceedings. Throughout our discussions, my phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Daniel, ranging from dismissive to outright hostile. "You're overreacting, Laura. Just come back and we'll forget all this," read one. "You're being childish. Remember, I'm the one with the high-paying job," taunted another. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the plan. It wasn't just about getting back at Daniel. It was about securing a future for Alex and me. The thought of Alex brought a pang of guilt. He was preparing for his college entrance exams, and this upheaval was the last thing he needed. I called him, explaining as much as I could without burdening him further. "Mom, I get it. Dad's been different." Alex's voice was mature beyond his years. "Don't worry about me. I'm with Grandma and Grandpa. Focus on what you need to do." Hearing his words, I felt a mix of pride and sadness. My son was growing up in a broken home, yet he was showing more resilience and understanding than many adults. A few days turned into a week and then 2. Uncle John and I refined our strategy, ensuring every base was covered. We planned for the worst, but hoped for the best. The aim was to confront Daniel with a fait accompli, a situation where he had no choice but to acquiesce to our terms. Meanwhile, I kept up with work remotely, grateful for understanding colleagues and a flexible job. The normalcy of work was a welcome distraction, but every evening, as I sat in Uncle John's study, the reality of my situation sank in. Daniel, once the man I thought I would spend my life with, was now someone I barely recognized. His greed and selfishness had eroded the love I once felt, leaving in its wake a determination to protect what was rightfully mine, my dignity, my son's future, and my peace of mind. As I prepared to return to New York, I felt a sense of clarity. The path ahead would not be easy, but I was no longer the woman who left that house weeks ago. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever Daniel threw my way. The journey back to New York was a quiet one, filled with a mix of apprehension and resolve. The city's skyline, once a symbol of shared dreams and aspirations, now loomed like a battleground. As Uncle John drove, his steady presence was a reassuring reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. The plan was simple, yet bold. We would confront Daniel with the reality of his actions and the consequences that awaited him. Uncle John had already laid the groundwork, consulting with legal experts and ensuring that everything was in place for a seamless execution. Upon arriving home, the sight of moving boxes and unfamiliar cars parked outside was jarring. Daniel's parents, unaware of the impending storm, greeted me with polite smiles. "Laura, it's good to have you back," Daniel's mother said, a hint of unease in her voice. Daniel, however, was nowhere to be seen. His absence was both a relief and a frustration. I needed to face him, to look him in the eye and let him know that his days of controlling our lives were over. The house felt different, as if it had lost its warmth. Daniel's parents had made themselves comfortable, but the atmosphere was tense, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken conflict. I retreated to my room, the same room where I had packed my bags weeks ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then. I unpacked my suitcase, each item a symbol of the new life I was carving out for myself and Alex. That evening, as I sat at the dinner table with Daniel's parents, the conversation was strained. They spoke of Daniel in glowing terms, oblivious to his manipulative ways. I nodded and smiled, keeping my true feelings hidden. The time for revelations was not yet here. Later that night, Daniel finally returned. He was surprised to see me, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Laura, you're back," he said, his tone a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Yes, Daniel, we need to talk," I replied, my voice calm but firm. He scoffed. "What's there to talk about? You left, remember?" I stood my ground. "It's about the house, Daniel, and our future." Daniel laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the empty room. "What about it? You think you can just come back and everything will be as it was?" "No, Daniel, things will never be the same, but you need to understand something. This house, it's not just yours to decide on." His expression changed, a hint of worry creeping in. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, ready to lay out the reality he was about to face. "This house, it's in my name too, and I've been talking to a lawyer. We have options, Daniel, and none of them look good for you." For a moment, Daniel was speechless. The confident, controlling man I had known was gone, replaced by someone who realized he was no longer in control. "This is just the beginning, Daniel. You thought you could push me out, make decisions without me. But I'm not the same person you thought you could manipulate. I'm fighting back, for me and for Alex." Daniel's face hardened, the reality of the situation setting in. "You can't do this, Laura. I won't let you." But I was resolute. "It's already done, Daniel. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with them." As I left him standing there, a mix of anger and disbelief on his face, I knew that the hardest part was yet to come. But I was ready to reclaim my life, my dignity, and my son's future. The following days were a whirlwind of activity and tense exchanges. Daniel oscillated between anger, disbelief, and desperate attempts to regain control. But with Uncle John's guidance and my newfound resolve, I navigated each challenge with a clarity I never knew I possessed. Daniel's parents, caught in the middle, were a source of unexpected sympathy. His mother, particularly, seemed to sense the gravity of the situation. "Laura, I never realized things were this bad between you two," she confided one afternoon, her eyes filled with concern. "It's been building up for a while," I admitted, finding solace in her understanding. Our conversation was a reminder that Daniel's actions affected more than just us. As the day of reckoning approached, I prepared myself for the final confrontation. Uncle John had arranged for a meeting with Daniel, his parents, and our respective lawyers. The goal was to settle matters as amicably as possible, given the circumstances. The meeting was held in a neutral location, a stark conference room that mirrored the cold reality of our situation. Daniel was already there when I arrived, his posture rigid, his face a mask of defiance. "Let's just get this over with," he muttered as I took my seat opposite him. The lawyers laid out the facts. The house, purchased with contributions from both of our families, was legally co-owned. Daniel's unilateral decisions and his recent behavior had put him in a precarious legal position. As the reality of his situation dawned on him, Daniel's facade began to crumble. He looked at me, a mix of anger and desperation in his eyes. "Laura, please. We can work this out. Just come back home." But the home he spoke of no longer existed, not for me. "Daniel, you made your choices. Now I'm making mine. It's over." The negotiations were tense but straightforward. We agreed to sell the house and divide the proceeds. Daniel's parents would move to a smaller place, and I would start afresh, somewhere new, somewhere where the shadows of the past couldn't reach. As the meeting concluded, Daniel's mother approached me, her eyes moist with unshed tears. "I'm sorry, Laura. I'm sorry for everything." I hugged her, a gesture of mutual forgiveness and understanding. "Take care of yourself," I whispered. Leaving the conference room, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The battle was over, and though the road ahead was uncertain, I was free. Free from Daniel's control, free to build a new life for Alex and myself. The drive back to Uncle John's house was a quiet one. I looked out the window, the city passing by in a blur. I thought of Alex, of the bright future he had ahead of him, and of the new chapter I was about to begin. Uncle John broke the silence. "You did well, Laura. I'm proud of you. Thank you, Uncle John, for everything." As we drove on, the sun began to set, casting a warm golden light over the city. It felt like a promise of new beginnings and brighter days ahead. Months had passed since the day I walked away from that conference room, away from a life that was no longer mine. With each passing day, the sense of liberation and self-discovery grew stronger. I was rebuilding my life, piece by piece, on my own terms. The house sold quicker than we had anticipated. With my share of the proceeds, I bought a quaint apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a place where Alex and I could start anew. The walls were adorned with memories, both old and new, each telling the story of our journey. Alex had excelled in his exams, earning a place at his desired university. His resilience and determination were a source of immense pride. We often talked about his future, his dreams, and I saw in his eyes the same hope and ambition that had driven me through my darkest days. I found solace in my work, diving into community nutrition programs and workshops. My experiences had ignited a passion for helping others, for sharing the lessons I had learned about self-care and resilience. Occasionally, I heard news about Daniel through mutual acquaintances. He had moved into a smaller place. His lifestyle drastically changed. There was no joy in hearing of his struggles, only a quiet acknowledgement that the choices we make shape our lives. Uncle John remained a pillar of support, his wisdom and guidance a constant in my life. We often met for coffee, discussing everything from politics to philosophy. He had been more than just a mentor through my ordeal. He had become a true friend. As I sat in my new living room, the evening sun casting a warm glow through the window, I reflected on the journey I had been through. The pain, the betrayal, the fight for my rights, it had all led me to this moment, a moment of peace and contentment. I had learned that strength comes not from what we endure, but from how we rise above it. I had faced my fears, stood up for myself and my son, and in doing so, had found a sense of purpose and self-worth that no one could take away. The phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. It was Alex, his voice bright and full of excitement. "Mom, I got an internship. It's exactly what I was hoping for." I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. "That's wonderful, Alex. I'm so proud of you." As we chatted, I realized this was what true happiness felt like. It wasn't about a perfect life. It was about a life lived with integrity, resilience, and love. The chapter with Daniel had closed, but a new one was just beginning. A chapter filled with hope, possibilities, and the promise of a future crafted by our own hands. And so, as the sun set, casting long shadows across the room, I knew that no matter what the future held, Alex and I would face it together, stronger and wiser than ever before.
I'd rather live with Mom than with you. It was in the dead of night on a Friday, just as the clock struck midnight. My husband James was engrossed in an online game in the living room, while I was at the dining table working on some tasks I brought home. James casually suggested we live separately, almost as if he was making small talk. Shocked, I asked why. Although our marriage had been on the rocks recently, I believed I had the right to hear his side of the story. "My name is Madison," I said at midnight on my birthday, right as I turned 35 and was undergoing fertility treatments. James dropped this bomb on me. This unexpected gift left me utterly dumbfounded. Without taking his eyes off his game, James said, "You just turned 35, right? Even if you get pregnant now, it's going to be a high-risk pregnancy. I've given up on having kids with you. That's why I'm going to live with my mom." What? That makes no sense, I retorted. I couldn't see any logical connection between giving up on having children and moving in with his mother. James and I got married the year before last. We had planned to enjoy some time together as newlyweds, but James was eager to start a family. Being the youngest of 3 brothers, with his older brothers already married and each having 3 kids, James was often told by them that it's best to have kids while you're young and energetic. Encouraged by this, we laughed it off and got to work on starting a family. But a year went by without any success. At one point, James snapped, "You need to get this checked out." "Check what?" I replied, "Figure out why we're not having kids." "There must be something wrong with you," he yelled. I was furious at his assumption, but still, I went to see a gynecologist just in case. To my dismay, the tests revealed that I indeed had issues making conception difficult. I was shocked. I had no symptoms, and the diagnosis was unexpected. According to Dr. Thompson, it's difficult but not impossible for you to conceive naturally. But sharing this news with James felt daunting. That evening, I tried to calmly explain the situation to James over dinner. James's response was triumphant, as if he had won something. "I knew it was you, but I can still get pregnant," I fumbled for words in my defense. James glared at me. "No, it hasn't happened so far, so it's not going to happen." He jumped to conclusions again, and I lost my temper. "For all we know, you could be the one with the issue," raising my voice. James shouted back, "Madison, the results are clear, and yet you try to pin this on me? Unbelievable." In a fit of anger, James slammed his hands on the table, causing me to flinch. "You're just a failure who can't have kids," he spat out before storming off to the bedroom. James's harsh words left me in tears as I cleaned up the dishes alone. I convinced myself that James was just shocked and lashed out. If we could just have a child, we could be a happy couple again. I resolved to keep trying to win back James's heart. As I started going to the gynecologist regularly, gaining more knowledge, my anxiety grew. Even on the days most likely for conception, we had no luck, and I became obsessed. One morning, I tentatively suggested to James, "Let's try tonight, please." He responded with disdain, "Aren't you embarrassed to bring up such a topic first thing in the morning?" I blushed, though it felt awkward. Trying to keep my tone gentle, I persuaded, "You want children too, right?" But James coldly retorted, "Honestly, I don't even want kids. They're expensive." After that, whenever I tried, James would refuse, claiming he was too busy or too tired. Being rejected repeatedly was a blow to my pride as a woman. Lately, James has been hooked on online gaming, staying up late into the night, and as a result, we hardly have any conversations, let alone intimacy. It seems like James has lost interest not just in having children but in me as well. Yet I didn't stop going to the gynecologist. What surprised me about fertility treatment was the number of couples there. The clinic I visit specializes in fertility treatments and is always packed. Even with an appointment, a 2 to 3 hour wait is the norm. Seeing so many couples with the same struggles as mine, all trying their best, was somewhat comforting. Occasionally, I'd see couples, tears of joy streaming down their faces, leaving the doctor's office. The wives, still with flat bellies, would tenderly touch their stomachs, while their husbands walked closely beside them. How I envied them. I wanted a child too. I wanted to regain James's love and find happiness again. I placed a fragile hope in having a child, but I hit a dead end when I was told that advancing to further treatments would require James to undergo tests. It might be impossible now, the doctor said. The walk back from the clinic always left me feeling desolate and on the verge of tears. Stepping onto the main street, I looked up to see an ostentatiously dressed elderly woman catching my eye. Startled, even my tears retreated. Probably in her 70s, her thick makeup and brightly colored dress were almost painful to look at. Though I couldn't recall knowing anyone like that, she oddly seemed familiar. Could that be my mother-in-law? Though we live in the same city, we rarely meet, so she looked completely different from what I remembered. But there was no mistaking the distinctive mole on her cheek. Yet my mother-in-law was supposed to be a modestly dressed typical grandmother. Shocked by her radical change in appearance, I quickly blended into the crowd. Truth be told, my mother-in-law is quite the character. Indulgent with herself but overly critical of others, she doesn't hesitate to hurl insults that most would balk at. Moreover, she dotes only on her youngest son, James, being the classic toxic parent who shows blatant favoritism among her children, treating the others merely as cash cows. Even her other sons detested her. When my father-in-law was on his deathbed from cancer last year, there was talk of her living with one of her sons. But both the eldest and the second son firmly refused. We thought the discussion would come our way, but she declared she would live alone while she was still healthy. Perhaps out of spite for being refused or just her nature, when my father-in-law passed away, she made a huge fuss, calling everyone ungrateful for stealing an old woman's retirement money and took all his inheritance without dividing it. Despite my brothers-in-law and James's attempts to divide it legally, she wouldn't budge, and no one could win against her. She told me, "I have no interest in getting along with you, so don't come to my house." But compared to the constant battles she has with my sisters-in-law, it's relatively peaceful. She never noticed me that day and disappeared into a store. The sight of her in that shop was so out of character for the mother-in-law, I knew that I couldn't help but stare at the sign. That night, I debated whether to tell James about his mother but decided against it. After all, she's an adult, and with my father-in-law gone, she's on her own. It's not my place to comment on her personal tastes. Months passed, and just as my birthday came around, James talked about moving out. I asked him, "Is there someone else you like?" Maybe his mother was just an excuse, and he was planning to remarry. But considering he spends his days gaming at home, it didn't seem like he was seeing anyone. James, in his turn, said, "Well, there's a girl in my gaming group I kind of like, but it's just online. For all I know, she could be a guy pretending to be a girl," which only made the situation more absurd. He could make rational judgments there, so why is he suddenly talking about moving? It made no sense to me. James simply repeated, "I just want to live with my mom more than I want to live with you." I wondered what reason he could possibly have for wanting to live with his mother instead of me. "So you've come to dislike me, lost your love for me?" I searched for a satisfying answer, posing the next question to James. Just voicing it made my heart ache. He doesn't need me anymore, a wife who can't bear children. I held back my sadness, waiting for James' response. Not really. What James's casual reply took me by surprise. Like I said before, I don't care about having kids anymore. What we need is a different financial strategy. Financial strategy? I echoed his unexpected words. James nodded calmly. "Yeah, my mom's inheritance," he said, dead serious. I was confused, failing to see the connection. My brothers are greedy. They'll use any excuse like having more kids to snatch a larger share of mom's inheritance. I won't let that happen. Who's the greedy one here? I was appalled but kept my thoughts to myself. But your mother is in great health. Isn't it too early to talk about inheritance? That's the point. She dislikes you, but she dotes on me. Living with her now might give me an edge in the inheritance. Plus, there's the sizable fortune my dad left her. We could live comfortably without working hard. We don't have kids to care for us in our old age, so we'll need the money, James explained with a dismissive tone. But I was horrified to understand his reasoning. So the reason why James wanted children is so you needed a child to take care of you in your old age. And now that's not possible. You want a bigger share of your mother's inheritance. I hope my assumption was wrong as I sought confirmation from James, but his answer was once again the opposite of my wishes. Of course, kids are supposed to take care of their parents. Living with my mom now might even get me the whole inheritance, James declared, truly his mother's son. I felt the strong familial ties, no intention of sharing fairly, as I remained silent. James kept talking. "When mom passes, I'll come back and live with you. You can't have kids, but you're decent at housework. You're useful as a housekeeper, and you bring in a decent salary as a full-time employee. Understood?" My true feelings burst out, cutting across James's words. Who would agree to such terms? To live separately and then live together again? This was too insulting. I knew James, the pampered youngest son, had his faults, but this self-serving scheme was unforgivable. Staying with James would never bring me happiness. In that moment, my love for James vanished completely. Let's get a lawyer to properly divide our assets and divorce. Divorce? I never said anything about divorcing, just living separately is fine, and hiring a lawyer is overkill. James was suddenly flustered, but seemed swayed by my explanation. No, you'll feel better as a single man too. I will be satisfied unless it's divided fairly and legally. Plus, having a third party involved means no lingering issues, right? James smirked. Maybe you're right. If I get a large portion of Mom's inheritance, my future is secure and I can marry someone else. Don't regret this. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, and make sure you have no regrets. The next day, I got a lawyer recommended by a divorced friend and went for a consultation. I contacted the landlord to inform them that only James would be moving out. I arranged for a moving company. As I made calls, I overheard James telling his mother over the phone, "I want to live with you and take care of you." I was astonished that he had proposed moving out even before consenting his mother. According to James, his mother was thrilled about living with him. She had some requests or something. Thus, the divorce preparations were carried out surprisingly smoothly. Initially, the assets were to be split evenly, but my competent lawyer managed to negotiate in my favor, securing 70% for me. Including compensation given James's selfish reasons for our divorce, I decided not to hold back and take what was due to me. 3 days after our divorce was finalized and James returned to his family home, as I was relaxing in my apartment, my phone's ringtone sounded. It was James. As soon as I answered, he pleaded, "Help me, please. Let's get married again. There's no inheritance. Mom spent it all on strippers. She's penniless. Worst, she's drowning in debt from senior loans, and even the house is mortgaged." Well, that's tough. Your mom was really into those strip clubs. I couldn't help but chuckle. That day, I had seen my former mother-in-law disappearing into a strip club. Out of curiosity, I checked the price list on the signboard and was shocked by the figures. Since James got obsessed with online gaming and stopped visiting, she had fallen for a stripper and squandered not only my father-in-law's inheritance, but also her retirement savings, ending up heavily in debt from loans even seniors could take. Why didn't you tell me if you knew? I'm not one to criticize personal hobbies. I never stopped you from gaming, did I? I retorted. James stumbled over his words before trying to change the subject. She's asking me to take out loans in my name, but that's impossible. Give me the money from our property division. If we get back together, it's both of our money, right? No way. Why not? You love me, don't you? Your husband is in trouble here. I did love you when we were married, but when you suggested moving out, any love I had for you disappeared completely, especially now when it's clear you're only after the money. There's no way we're getting back together. But my mom's telling me to give her all my salary. She says it's only natural for children to support their parents. She was always so kind to me alone. James started to whine pathetically. But his and his mother's mindset that they should come first and everyone else should cater to them was all too similar. It was too much self-inflicted misery for me to feel obligated to help. We're divorced now. We're strangers. Your family's problems are yours to solve, I said brightly, hanging up and then blocking his number. I called my former sisters-in-law next. It had only been 3 days since the divorce, and I had planned to wait a bit before telling them. But given the circumstances, sooner seemed better. I shared with them the recent revelations about my former mother-in-law and the details of the divorce. They took pity on me and promised to discipline James afterward. Apparently, my former brothers-in-law stormed into the family home, causing a major uproar. I've heard a bit about it from one of my former sisters-in-law. After James's call, I changed my apartment locks just to be safe. But I decided to move out. It felt like a complete break from the past. While looking for a new place, I learned that the family home was up for sale. I could ask my former sisters-in-law what came of James and his mother, but I chose not to care. I was ready to face forward, leave the past behind, and start anew. I'm considering a pet-friendly apartment for my next place, where I can enjoy a leisurely, free life with a cute cat. Emily sneered at me after I announced my resignation, and I responded by maintaining a silent, steady gaze. Our conversation had revolved around the company's decision to cut labor costs, with particular disdain aimed at those supposedly exploiting overtime pay. Tom, too, seemed to relish the notion of trimming expenses. A week later, my phone incessantly rang with calls from the company. Upon answering, the president inquired sharply, "Who exactly are you?" I couldn't help but scoff mockingly at the president's question. In response, I introduced myself as Lily Johnson, a 59-year-old employee with 37 years of dedicated service since my college graduation. I explained our company's role in providing administrative services, particularly catering to busy company presidents, handling clerical work, and specializing in tax-related matters. I proudly managed 45 clients, a responsibility that had grown overwhelming despite the assistance of a part-timer. Despite the challenges, I couldn't show any sign of weakness. Our clients were long-standing relationships, and their adversities fueled my determination. Today, as I sat in front of my computer, the relentless harassment from Tom and Emily weighed heavily on my mind. Tom, 7 years my junior and now the head of the tax department, had drastically changed his demeanor 3 months ago upon promotion. His once polite tone was replaced with condescension and complaints, making every interaction a struggle. Even when I countered, he remained unfazed, instructing me to consult the manual for guidance and warning against unnecessary actions. Emily, Tom's assistant, joined in the harassment, criticizing my efficiency and mocking my rank and file status, despite being the first to decline a promotion to department head, a fact unknown to Tom and Emily. I committed to completing my regular duties, but their harassment persisted, with Tom accusing me of increasing overtime and branding it a waste. Emily echoed his sentiment, sighing as she claimed my constant overtime was dragging down the entire tax department's performance. The recent cause of my overtime was Tom unexpectedly leaving a month's worth of client files on my desk to be filed by the end of the month. After work, my face drained of color as I glanced at the files before me. "Wait, these all have deadlines this month, right?" I uttered in confusion. However, before I could grasp the gravity of the situation, Tom was already packing up his desk, completely uninterested in addressing my concerns. "I'm heading out. Take care with that," he casually remarked as he swiftly left the office, leaving me with a pile of urgent tasks. Emily followed suit, adding insult to injury with a mocking laugh. The incredulity of the situation weighed on me, and I sighed heavily as I opened the client files scattered on my desk. To my dismay, some of the files were originally Emily's responsibility. The realization deepened my sigh. I understood why Tom had been subjecting me to relentless harassment. They wanted me to retire quickly. My extensive experience and deeper knowledge in taxation made me a preferred resource for other members of the tax department over Tom. Tom's unapproachable demeanor and unattractive appearance made everyone except Emily avoid him. It seemed Emily's proximity to him was strategic, driven by Tom's preference for younger female employees. The shallow nature of their thinking sent a chill down my spine. Emily's harassment was not just a personal vendetta. She aimed to curry favor with Tom, the one evaluating the tax department's performance. Despite these challenges, I had to manage the declarations alongside preparing tax declarations for my assigned companies. It seemed today's workload was far from over. However, claiming overtime would only invite complaints from Tom and Emily, leaving me resigned to the prospect of unpaid extra hours. Then, unexpectedly, I received a summons to the president's office. Our company had recently undergone a change in leadership due to the former president's sudden illness. The new president, the former president's son, wasn't fully acquainted with our company. As I entered the office, I noticed Tom and Emily with unpleasant smirks on their faces. In a tense atmosphere, the president dropped a bombshell. "Lily will need you to resign by the end of this month." My mind spun as I asked for clarification. Tom and Emily had apparently accused me of overbilling for overtime, citing that while others had around 15 hours, I had exceeded 80 hours. The president, oblivious to the true circumstances, seemed impressed with Tom and Emily's zero overtime. The reality of the situation hit me. The inflated overtime was a result of doing Tom and Emily's work. However, revealing Tom's instructions would risk portraying it as my own inability to manage time effectively. I presented the facts, asserting that I hadn't overbilled for overtime but struggled to finish my workload within regular hours. The president sighed deeply, expressing doubt but acknowledging the lack of evidence to pursue the matter further. Nevertheless, he insisted that they couldn't retain someone working at such a slow pace. Resigned to the situation, the president suggested my resignation, and it seemed his mind was made up. Told to leave the company I had devoted 37 years to, I felt a weariness settle in. Despite my dedication, the additional workload from Tom and Emily went unappreciated. I agreed to resign at the end of the month, acknowledging that I had already communicated my decision to the president. As I glanced at Tom and Emily, their vulgar smiles reflected satisfaction. Leaving the president's office, Emily taunted me with a sarcastic, "Thanks for quitting," her sneer cutting through. I responded with a silent stare, facing similar disdain from Tom, who shared his approval of cutting labor costs and labeled me as someone exploiting overtime pay. Observing their cheerful conversation, I pondered the handover process, creating documents for all my clients. I ensured proper farewells and appointments with those I could meet personally. Unable to schedule a meeting with the president, I resorted to letters to inform them of my successor. A week post-resignation, enjoying a moment of relaxation at home, my mobile phone rang. Seeing the company's call, I hesitated, having already completed social insurance procedures. However, persistent calls from both the company and Tom and Emily's personal mobiles led me to answer reluctantly. As I picked up, the president urgently spoke, asking, "Who exactly are you?" I couldn't help but mockingly reply, "Just an unemployed lady who resigned from the company, nothing else." In response, the president urgently explained the chaos since my departure. 49 calls to stop transactions with the company. He pleaded for my immediate return, revealing a sense of panic in his tone. Reluctantly, I rose from my seat and made my way back to the company. Upon my arrival, I found Tom and Emily waiting, their faces notably pale and dark circles underlining their weary eyes. Surprised by their drastic change in appearance, I inquired about what was happening. Tom glared at me and revealed, "Since you left, we've been bombarded with calls to stop transactions, not just from your clients but also from prospective companies we were planning to introduce." "What did you do?" Emily echoed the suspicion, expressing dissolution at the thought of me resorting to underhanded tactics. Their haggard appearance suggested the toll of handling cancellations. While I had not manipulated the clients, I had a hunch about the reason behind the transaction halts. Considering the inevitability of cancellations, I mumbled my thoughts aloud. Tom, however, accused me outright, insisting I had orchestrated something. He demanded I go to the president's office immediately, forcefully escorting me there. Upon entering the president's office with Tom and Emily, the president greeted me with a direct look in his eyes. Tom declared, "President, I brought her," with an air of authority, while Emily hurriedly followed suit. Ignoring their accusatory tone, the president questioned me about the abrupt halt in transactions after my departure. I took a deep breath and explained, "Our clients don't need us to manage their taxes. There are tax accountant firms that offer cheaper services. They continued with us because of me." Tom snapped back, questioning my self-worth, and Emily taunted me, both challenging my value to the company. Undeterred, I elaborated on my unique approach, offering tailored tax-saving strategies that resonated with our clients. Tom dismissed it as inefficient, arguing that their manual-based operations were more practical. The president sighed deeply, recognizing the fundamental difference in our approaches. In a serious tone, he said, actually signaling a crucial revelation or decision to follow. I received a surprising call from my father, the former president. It turns out that some clients who had stopped transactions went directly to Dad to negotiate on my behalf. I hadn't anticipated clients going to such lengths for me. Dad emphasized that the tax department thrived because of my contributions. Not only did I manage my clients efficiently, but I also supported my colleagues' clients, possessing knowledge that even Tom couldn't match. Dad disclosed that if I hadn't declined the promotion, I would have held a higher position than a department head by now. The current president expressed regret with a pained expression. Emily appeared shocked, probably grappling with the idea that I could have been her superior. The president apologized for making me resign initially and asked if I would consider revoking my resignation. According to Dad, I was indispensable to the company. While I appreciated the change in the president's perspective, I hesitated to accept. Tom interrupted our conversation, visibly upset, and protested the president's decision, questioning why I was chosen over him. Emily echoed his sentiments, praising Tom's leadership and expressing disbelief at the preference for me. The president then sternly addressed them, revealing that since my resignation, numerous complaints had been received from the tax department, suggesting they had been shifting their workload onto others. Tom's face turned pale as the president exposed the fact that he had been pushing the preparation of client declaration forms onto subordinates, including Emily's work for multiple clients. The president pointed out the irony, considering Tom had accused me of being a salary thief. Observing Tom and Emily's pale expressions, the president continued by revealing an alleged leak about their romantic involvement. Tom struggled to defend himself, claiming he was merely mentoring Emily as her superior. However, the president produced receipts from the accounting department indicating dining expenses filed by Tom. Confronted with evidence, Tom, sweating profusely, was unable to provide a convincing explanation. Emily, too, turned ghostly pale as the president accused them of neglecting their duties, inflating expense claims, and violating company policy by having an affair in the office while being married. In a calm and straightforward manner, the president declared the termination of their employment effective immediately. Tom and Emily tried to resist, promising to retract the receipt claims and pleading for their jobs. "I have a family," Tom desperately pleaded, attempting to reverse his termination. Emily echoed his sentiments, carefully expressing her fear of being fired. She promised to apologize to me and others for burdening them with work. Realizing the gravity of the situation involving neglect of duties and an affair with a supervisor, concerned about her reputation, she implored for a second chance. Sensing their desperation, I offered advice. "Why don't you stop resisting? It's undignified," I suggested. Tom glared at me, retorting, "Shut up. What would a single person like you understand?" I sighed, reminding him, "Tom, you were the one who got me fired. It's just karma. What goes around comes around. Why don't you take some responsibility and reflect a bit?" Frustrated, Tom looked away, while Emily bit her lip in distress. Aware of more details about their misconduct, I turned to the president, asking with a smile if I should share them. Tom and Emily frantically tried to stop me, fearing further exposure. I issued an ultimatum, warning them that wrongdoings would eventually come to light, urging them to face reality before it worsened. At my word, both Tom and Emily collapsed to their knees, and the president decided to fire them on the spot. Later, I revealed more about their misdeeds, including Tom faking business trips to spend days with Emily and their insidious tactics of harassing disliked employees into quitting. Despite my attempts to help those employees, Tom and Emily's strategies were relentless. They repeatedly reprimanded and pressured employees out of my sight, often assigning sudden tasks with tight deadlines. The resigned employees had initially asked me to keep quiet, but since they were now happily working elsewhere, I decided it was time to speak up. The president, furious at my revelations, expressed anger about cutting Tom and Emily's final salary. He planned to thoroughly investigate past inflated expense claims. Tom, with tears in his eyes, thanked the president not to cut his salary, fearing the impact on his family. As the truth unraveled, Tom's affair with Emily came to light, leading to Tom's divorce. The two now face claims for compensation in the divorce lawsuit, marking the consequential aftermath of their actions. I became aware of the situation when Tom reached out to me, seeking assistance in persuading the president to reconsider their firing. Emily and Tom found themselves in dire straits. Despite their efforts, they struggled to secure new jobs in the tax industry. The industry's close-knit nature meant that word of their misdeeds spread rapidly, making potential employers hesitant to hire them. Desperate for income to cover divorce compensation and living expenses, they resorted to day labor at construction sites, a stark departure from their previous office roles. Emily would often call me in tears, pleading for help. "Lily, please help. I only wanted a better life, and I never truly liked Tom," she'd cry. However, I couldn't ignore the fact that their predicament was a consequence of their own actions. Many, including myself, had been impacted by their behavior. I reminded Emily that the consequences were a result of her choices. "You can't unring a bell," I told her firmly. Facing hardships was the consequence of her decisions. Emily's despair echoed through her protests. Despite her regrets, the outcome remained unchanged. As for me, I chose to distance myself from the chaos of the corporate world. Despite the president's pleas for my return, I declined. Once told to resign, I had no desire to return. Instead, I found solace in assisting at a friend's tax office, supplementing my income and enjoying a more relaxed lifestyle. In the future, I entertained the idea of starting my own office, where I could serve my clients without the constraints of corporate bureaucracy. In my own space, I could fully dedicate myself to my clients' needs. As a tax accountant, I aspired to be on equal footing with my clients, providing service without superiority. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with excitement and opportunities to pursue what truly mattered to me. My second life had just begun, and I eagerly anticipated the journey ahead. I regretfully forgot my wallet again, so I asked if my friend could cover the bill. When my niece's school had an extended break, it became a routine for my single mother's sister-in-law and her daughter to stay at our house. Initially, I sympathized with her situation and believed in helping out, but over time she began taking it for granted. One day, she insisted on going to a new outlet mall nearby, and reluctantly, I agreed. However, she conveniently forgot her wallet and demanded that I pay, frustrating me. Despite this, I didn't want to disappoint my sweet niece, who often went without due to their circumstances. Reluctantly, I covered the cost, insisting my sister-in-law repay me. Unfortunately, it didn't end there. On another occasion, my sister-in-law demanded another trip to the outlet mall, and this time I was determined not to give in. My husband and I, in our 30s and married for 5 years without children, had discussed the possibility of infertility and decided to let things happen naturally. Our parents were supportive, understanding that not every couple follows the same path. Though still hopeful for children, we were planning our future without excluding the possibility of living without them. My younger brother, still single, once joked about having lots of kids for my share, seemingly unaware of our fertility discussions. Meanwhile, my husband's older sister, the sister-in-law in this story, was a single mother who regularly visited us during her daughter's school vacations. While I suggested alternatives, she insisted on staying, citing financial hardship. My niece, adorable and well-behaved, quickly became close to us, creating cherished summer memories at our house. As she entered middle school, the expenses began to mount with stationery, magazines, and fashion. Despite not wanting to interfere, my husband and I decided to give a generous middle school entrance gift. Touched by the thoughtful thank you letter, we looked forward to enjoying our separate vacations due to his work commitments. However, after Marine Day, my sister-in-law and niece unexpectedly arrived, announcing their month-long stay, reminiscent of previous years. I reminded her of our agreement to end these extended stays, but she brushed it off, saying, "I'll just stay in the room." Entering the room confidently, my sister-in-law remarked, "I've used every year," while my niece hesitated. Urged by her mother, my niece hurriedly brought their luggage, apologizing to me before casually settling in. My sister-in-law suggested a visit to a new nearby outlet mall, controlling the air conditioner and changing settings as she made herself comfortable, expressing delight and not worrying about saving electricity while sipping on a chilled beer my husband had prepared. Frustrated, I called my husband, who couldn't leave work due to their unexpected visit. He asked me to handle his sister for the time being, promising to talk to her when he got home, even if it meant working late. Troubled by her unexpected stay, I couldn't ask him to leave work early. Reluctantly, I decided it was better to take my sister-in-law and niece to the outlet mall than to have them linger around the house. My niece, seemingly interested, nodded along with her mother's conversation. Despite my reservations, I couldn't bring myself to ask her to endure it, especially considering she's my husband's relative. Unprepared for lunch and with unexpected guests, I reluctantly agreed to take them to the outlet mall, acting for a bus due to the heat. Complaining about the walk and the absence of the car, my sister-in-law begrudgingly understood the situation. As we arrived at the outlet mall, she started fussing about forgetting her wallet. Her explanation about mistakenly putting her credit card back in her wallet didn't make sense. While I pondered her story, my niece looked momentarily disappointed but soon smiled, saying she's happy just looking around. Feeling sorry for my niece, I suggested covering today's shopping, estimating it wouldn't exceed $400 for 3 people. However, my sister-in-law seemed most delighted, eyeing expensive items from famous brands. I ended up playing the role of her wallet, using my credit card since I didn't have enough cash, demanding repayment as soon as we got home. My sister-in-law claimed she couldn't do it right away, citing a lack of cash and a forgotten bank card. When I suggested using her credit card's cash advance, she claimed her credit cards had expired, blaming a mix-up with a new one. I pressed her for proof, incredulous that she had allowed her cards to expire 3 months ago. She explained that she had panicked and switched wallets when her old one broke, making an honest mistake. She didn't want her in-laws to know about her financial struggles, having already burdened them with the divorce. I found it challenging to be too harsh with my sister-in-law, especially since she promised to repay me. Once back at her house, during that summer, she stayed with us for about a month, while my niece eagerly helped with housework and expressed interest in cooking. My sister-in-law assumed a more demanding mother-in-law-like role, questioning the delay in lunch and criticizing our approach to saving electricity. My sister-in-law never contributed to housework and complained twice as much as anyone else. With her and my niece's presence, daily chores expanded to doing laundry for 4 people. When I mentioned the no air conditioning rule, complaints tripled. Frustrated, I asked my sister-in-law for help in hanging the laundry, but she dismissed it, insisting that being in the sun affected her skin and demanding an expensive sunscreen brand. After a month of enduring this, my sister-in-law finally left with my niece. However, when I asked her to repay the money she owed, she refused, claiming she couldn't do it before payday. Persistent in my demands, I eventually sent a certified letter as proof. When my niece discovered her mother hadn't repaid the money, she revealed that her mother had been receiving financial support from her ex-in-laws since the divorce. My niece promised to take responsibility and repay me from the financial support her mother received. She also expressed concern about her mother's increasingly sloppy lifestyle, embarrassing her. This situation fueled my anger towards my carefree sister-in-law, with my niece approaching high school and college expenses looming. I felt compelled to teach my sister-in-law a lesson. Taking advantage of the school break, my sister-in-law and niece stayed with us again. Immediately upon arrival, my sister-in-law demanded a trip to the outlet mall, claiming she needed winter clothes. Sensing a potential repeat of her carelessness, I had already contacted some allies. After about 2 hours of shopping, my sister-in-law called admitting she forgot her wallet and requested I cover the cost. Half of me thought it was typical, while the other half was exasperated. Claiming that my niece wasn't feeling well and we had already gone home, I declined to cover her expenses, infuriated by her carelessness regarding her daughter. I emphasized that all she had to do was admit she didn't have enough money and return the items. Why did I have to cover the expenses for her shopping? Regardless, I needed to proceed with my plan. I informed her that I would be back soon after dropping my niece off at home. She questioned the time frame, and I mentioned I had just reached a new nearby bus stop, indicating it would take another hour using public transportation. Surprisingly, she accepted this without demanding a taxi, making me suspicious that she might be up to something. An hour later, I arrived at the designated store with my collaborators. My sister-in-law was there, arms full of clothes and bags, instructing the staff to add more items. It seemed she planned to shop even more while awaiting my return. When I greeted her with an apology for the delay, she was surprised to see familiar faces beside me. Alongside me stood my husband, who was supposed to be at work, and then my father-in-law appeared, changing my sister-in-law's expression from surprise to confusion. She stammered, questioning why my husband was there. In truth, I had informed him about her failure to repay the money, and he was aware of everything that had transpired. He had agreed with my plan and was actually at home on a day off, hiding in the bedroom when my sister-in-law arrived. I had followed our plan and told her he was at work, and she believed me without checking. After hearing the story from my niece, my husband agreed that we should inform his parents. We reported everything, including her extended stay and refusal to repay the money. When I explained our plan for the day to my in-laws, they were furious, saying it was outrageous. After separating from my sister-in-law at the mall, I immediately contacted them. My husband had driven ahead and waited for us. My niece and I left my sister-in-law and went to the parking lot, where my husband was waiting to drive us to a hotel to meet my in-laws. They had planned to go on a short trip to a rural area, but they prioritized our situation over their trip and waited at the hotel. I felt bad that their plans were ruined, but they insisted on dealing with my sister-in-law's antics first. As planned, we left my niece with my mother-in-law at the hotel and returned to the outlet mall. When we confronted her, my sister-in-law furiously accused me of being cheeky for someone who was just a wallet to her. However, my husband and father-in-law took away all the clothes and bags she was holding. My husband retorted, "What are you doing? Don't return my clothes. They're not yours if you're not paying for them." My sister-in-law hesitated for a moment as my father-in-law returned the items to the store staff. My husband then dragged her out, and as he pulled her arm, she screamed, "It hurts. Let me go. Someone help, he's attacking me." Realizing she couldn't overpower him, she started accusing my husband of being a villain. My father-in-law, who had returned from explaining to the store, pulled out something from his jacket pocket. He was, in fact, a police officer. I just happened to witness the incident, he explained, and everyone around us stopped listening to my sister-in-law's complaints. They pushed her into my husband's car parked in the lot. After reporting her actions to my in-laws, my father-in-law immediately checked her bank account. My niece knew where the passbook was, so they checked at my sister-in-law's house while she was away. The in-laws had been providing her with a monthly stipend, believing her claim of wanting to save the divorce settlement money for my niece's future. However, the entire amount was withdrawn on the day it was deposited, leaving a zero balance. The account in my niece's name, supposed to contain the divorce settlement, was almost empty because my sister-in-law didn't receive alimony due to her fault in the divorce. She also withdrew the child support from her ex-husband immediately after it was deposited. Furthermore, she confessed to not working despite telling her parents she was. She spent her days leisurely using the support money and child support. The divorce settlement money she claimed to save for my niece was spent on her lifestyle. When it ran out, she planned to make me buy designer goods and sell them for cash. She even boasted about how well-known tag outlet items sold. My father-in-law hung his head in shame and apologized to us. Despite feeling sorry for my father-in-law, I showed them a video as evidence. It captured my sister-in-law red-handed. Whenever she and her daughter stayed with us, my husband's and my belongings mysteriously disappeared. It was too coincidental to happen every time, and more items vanished with each visit. Without proof, I couldn't accuse her, but I kept an eye on her. After she didn't repay the money I had fronted, I couldn't watch her all the time, so I installed hidden cameras in our rooms multiple times during her stay. She seemed to be searching our room when I was out. Finally, she began to blatantly steal. Just before leaving, there were times when she had checked the location many times and would go straight to his destination and steal what she was looking for. With practiced skill, she knew exactly where to go, swiftly taking specific items like my jewelry and my husband's luxury watch. The cameras caught her in the act, even capturing her face as she didn't notice them. My father-in-law, a police officer, was visibly furious, saying it's shameful to have a criminal in the family. He was overwhelmed with anger and sadness when confronted. My sister-in-law brazenly claimed she had already sold the stolen items. My father-in-law instructed us to file a police report and submit the video as evidence. However, we were hesitant about turning in our own family. It's not a crime among Ames, right? We'll count someone who exploits kindness and repays generosity with evil as family, my husband said as he started the car engine. My sister-in-law asked, "Where are you taking me?" My father-in-law answered, "To the police, obviously." She screamed as if it was the end of the world, begging us for mercy. She tried to destroy my phone, claiming it would erase the evidence. But I informed her it was just a copy, and the original was safe at home. She resigned to silence when she realized she had no escape. She pleaded, "I'll repay the money, just don't take me to the police." It's not just a matter of getting your money back. The stolen items had sentimental value, I explained. It wasn't just about the money. My jewelry I bought with my first salary, gifts from my husband, and heirlooms from my late grandmother. The same went for my husband's luxury watch. But we worried about what would happen to my niece if her mother became a criminal. We thought my in-laws would take care of her, but it would hurt her to know her mother was a thief. So for my niece's sake, we proposed not to file a report if she kept her promise to repay us. My father-in-law agreed to ensure she kept this promise. She had to repay a set amount each month earned through her own labor. If she failed, we would immediately file a report. I told him that I had recorded the entire conversation as suggested by my father-in-law for evidence. My sister-in-law had no way to deny or forget what was said. She had no choice but to hang her head in the face of the reality that, "I don't know, I didn't say it, I forgot," was no longer valid. Later, she was taken back to her parents' house by my father-in-law. We received an apology from my in-laws later. They admitted they had been too lenient due to their love for their granddaughter and their daughter's manipulations. They realized they had spoiled her too much and vowed to re-educate her strictly. My sister-in-law, who had always been pampered, thought it was her due. After getting engaged, she quit her job to become a housewife, even though it was difficult to get a job again after the divorce. My sister-in-law herself confessed that she thought she was only working part-time, but in reality, she wasn't working at all. After her divorce, she didn't even attempt to work, saying she didn't want to be associated with unfashionable older women. My father-in-law, knowing she was too sheltered, arranged for her to work at a company owned by his acquaintance. The owner was strict but fair. She struggled with basic manners and language, and her salary was managed by my mother-in-law, used to repay us. My sister-in-law and her daughter moved out of the house left by her ex-husband and now live under strict supervision with her parents. My niece is becoming a more responsible person, helping her grandparents. She plans to stay with them during the winter break but looks forward to visiting us during the spring break. My husband and I are excited for her next visit. As for my sister-in-law, regardless of any change in her, she is not welcome in our house. We both agree it's best to avoid unpleasant feelings. Hey everyone, I'm Claire, and I want to share a chapter of my life that revolves around challenging relationships with my in-laws and husband. Currently navigating the complexities of a divorce, I thought it might resonate with those of you who've experienced unwarranted criticism from your in-laws. Let me take you back to how it all began. I met Zane, my now estranged husband, on a dating site when I was a 19-year-old college student. Zane, at 25, had a stable job. Despite the age gap, love blossomed between us. I've never been one to judge based on age or appearance, so Zane's age was never a concern for me. However, Zane struggled with our age difference. He often questioned, "Why are you with me, Claire? I don't understand. I'm so much older than you. You could find someone your own age who's better suited for you." Yes, I could, but I don't want to. I fell in love with you, and age doesn't matter to me, I reassure him. Burdened by insecurities, Zane persisted, "There must be other reasons, Claire. It's not natural for someone like you to love someone like me. I wish you'd tell me the truth." I am telling you the truth. I don't want to date boys my age. I love you, and that's all that matters to me, I insisted. Despite my assurances, Zayn struggled to believe me, revealing deep-seated self-esteem issues that may have contributed to his single status. Determined to prove the authenticity of my feelings, I embarked on the journey to demonstrate the depth of my love for him. Throughout our entire relationship, I refrained from letting Zayn spend money on me. While I wasn't a broke college student, I wasn't rolling in wealth either. Despite my financial constraints, I made sure to buy him gifts and cover my own expenses each time. I held a modest job, so I wasn't destitute. Zayn seemed to appreciate these gestures. Regrettably, Zayn's low self-esteem persisted, and he continued to doubt the authenticity of my love. Despite my best efforts to be supportive and understanding, his mistrust shattered my heart. It wasn't until the first 2 years had passed that I discovered the root of Zayn's self-esteem issues. Meeting his parents, Michael and Molly, shed light on his struggles. Michael, Zayn's father, had experienced a stroke of luck, winning the lottery and dramatically improving their lives. They purchased an extravagant house and secured their future with the remaining funds. However, Michael and Molly carried an air of superiority during our initial encounter. Michael boasted, "Not everyone can make it big like me. I was a hard-working man, and look where it got me. Do you know how uncommon it is to win a huge lottery? The chances are very low, but I did it on the first try." They took pride in their decision-making skills, insinuating that Zayn, despite completing college, would never match their financial success. Molly hinted that Zayn's previous partners were gold diggers, leaving as soon as their financial situation improved. The couple openly questioned Zayn's ability to make sound choices. This attitude infuriated me. Zayn's parents indirectly accused every girl he dated of being interested only in his money. Over time, Zayn internalized these beliefs, contributing to his insecurities. The continuation that I, too, was a gold digger became a humiliating part of the narrative. Fed up with the unjust assumptions, I decided to defend both Zayn and myself. "I'm sorry, but I have to disagree with you. Zayn has worked hard to establish himself in his career, and with time, he will achieve even greater success," I declared. Michael rebutted, "Well, that doesn't change the fact that women only want him for money. The money we have is ours, but Zay does co-own the house. Ultimately, it will be his when we pass. Let me tell you, every time they see our $200,000 house, I swear these girls see dollar signs in their eyes. I can't vouch for Zayn's past relationships, but I'm certainly not in this for the money. I love your son, and that's the reason we're together. I have no interest in your house," I asserted. "Don't worry, Claire. Sometimes it's challenging to accept that people can be successful and live in nice houses. You live in a small rented apartment with roommates. After spending time around our house, you might start desiring it too. It's just a matter of time," Michael replied. Michael and Molly's comments were pushing my anger to the brink. I was on the verge of exploding. Zayn heard it all but chose not to respond or defend himself, steering the conversation in a different direction. His nonchalant attitude surprised me. On our way home, I decided to address it with him. "Zayn, your parents are being unkind. They're insulting both of us." "Why didn't you speak up?" I questioned. "What did you expect me to say, Claire? I can't be certain they're entirely wrong. Women in the past have used me to try and benefit from my parents' wealth. They made grand plans involving the house and how it would be ours once my parents passed away. Even if they were gold diggers, that doesn't mean I am one too. You stayed silent when your family insulted me as well. You know my family is well off now. There's a chance they're right about everything. I'm not saying you had bad intentions, but I can understand why it might seem questionable. You don't have parents, so you rely on my inheritance alone. What you're suggesting is absurd, Zayn. I've never pressured you to spend money on me, and just because I don't have an inheritance doesn't give you the right to label me a gold digger," I retorted. Zayn remained unwilling to acknowledge my concerns, insisting that he loved me and the reasons behind it didn't matter. He shrugged off the need for further discussion. While some might have found solace in such assurances, I couldn't accept the thought of him harboring negative beliefs about me. I attempted numerous conversations, hoping to make him understand my perspective. I even suggested therapy, recognizing its potential benefits for him. However, he adamantly claimed there was nothing wrong, causing me to eventually abandon the effort. As time passed, I distanced myself from his family. We became engaged shortly after my college graduation, and although my job paid decently, I started saving to contribute to our wedding expenses. We split the costs evenly and got married when I was 22. However, the subsequent 3 years turned into a tumultuous period of my life. Zane frequently visited his parents, returning home in a sour mood each time. I knew Michael and Molly were still taunting him and branding me as a gold digger. Despite my pleas for Zane to limit contact with them, he continued to engage with his parents. Their words poisoned his perception of our relationship, convincing him that no one could genuinely love him. Even after years of love and care, Zane remained suspicious of me. The burden of constantly proving myself became increasingly draining. However, the breaking point arrived on Zane's birthday. In line with his preference for small celebrations, we had a quiet cake party at home. I presented him with the expensive watch he had desired. Zane was elated with the gift, but my joy waned when he suggested visiting his parents to showcase it. Despite my reluctance, I accompanied him at his insistence. Upon reaching their house, Zane eagerly displayed the watch to Molly and Michael. "Mom, Dad, look at this beautiful watch Claire gave me. I've been wanting it for a while now." "Isn't it gorgeous?" Zane exclaimed. "Oh, did she know Zane? It seems she does love you after all. We were quite concerned for a while there," Molly remarked. "Don't get carried away, Michael. She's a gold digger. She married our son because we own a $200,000 house." "Let's not forget the facts," Michael interjected. "Yeah, you're right. I almost forgot that the house is the only reason Claire married Zane. Excuse me, why do you think I married your son? For your house?" I retorted, feeling uncomfortable. "Well, you were just living in an apartment after working for 4 years. Besides, Zane is so much older than you. Why would you marry him unless you want something from him?" "I'm sure our house was always an attraction, if not his money," Michael continued. "I married your son because I love him. All your theories about my gold-digging intentions are wrong. Zane knows the truth, and he will tell you that, won't you, Zane?" I asked, to my complete surprise. To my complete surprise, Zane remained silent. I was already feeling uncomfortable with my in-laws' belief that I was a gold digger, but Zane's reaction or lack thereof shocked me. He kept his head down and avoided eye contact with me, leaving me feeling perplexed. I decided to push him a bit. I couldn't fathom why he wasn't standing up for me. "Why are you not saying anything? Your parents always thought I was a gold digger. How will they know the real me if you don't tell them? Why are you quiet? Tell them they're wrong," I urged. I don't know what you want me to say, Claire. I don't know if my parents are off the mark. There might be a possibility that you're after this house," Zane responded. "Are you serious right now, Zane? You believe I married you for your assets?" I was incredulous. He's not wrong to think like that. It's suspicious that you've never considered buying a house. You haven't even discussed it with him. For someone renting a place, owning the house should have been a priority, Zane's mother interjected. "Yeah, it should be a priority. But you've chosen not to work toward owning a house. Our place is expensive, and you can't afford something like this even if you tried. So you decided to marry Zane and settle here. That makes more sense to me," Zane's father added. "I mean, why would you marry me, Claire? You might have feelings for me, but I think there's more to it than just love," Zane said. I found myself speechless after this exchange. All the love I had for Zane seemed to have been reduced to nothing. At the end of the day, my in-laws and even my husband viewed me as a gold digger. While my in-laws' reaction bothered me, it was Zane's response that devastated me. In that moment, I made a decision. I wanted a divorce. I didn't immediately disclose my decision to them. I waited for the right time. So when Zane and I returned to our place, I contacted a lawyer and initiated the divorce process. The lawyer assured me that the papers would be ready within a week. In the meantime, I opted to stay in a separate room. Zane assumed I was just letting off steam and had no idea of what was coming. When the divorce papers finally arrived at my parents' house, I packed my bags and left. When Zane called me in a panic, I instructed him to come to an address and bring my in-laws along. Despite his confusion, he agreed. Upon their arrival, I was waiting on the porch. They looked taken aback by the house. I said, "You must be wondering why I brought you here. It's a beautiful house, isn't it? No one can compare their house to this. It costs around $2 million in today's market. Pretty expensive, but worth the money. There's also furniture with an added value of millions." I explained. "What is this place, Claire? I don't know why you have access to such a house. Why don't you guys come in so that we can talk?" "I can't tell you everything on my porch," I continued. I brushed off their astonishment and walked inside. They trailed behind, even more impressed by the opulence within. As we settled down, I took a deep breath and addressed them. "I've reached a decision, and that's why you're here. I filed for divorce. Here are the papers. We can proceed with an uncontested divorce if you agree," I told them. "What? I don't understand. Why are you filing for divorce?" Zane's voice held a mixture of confusion and concern. "Because you and your parents believe I'm a gold digger. You think I'm after your house, right? Despite my assurances, you refuse to listen. So I'll spare you from my gold-digging self and divorce," I explained. "That's ridiculous. We didn't say anything untrue. Why the dramatics?" Zane couldn't believe it. "I think this is for the best. She's adamant. You should sign the papers. At least then you'll find someone who truly loves you," his mother interjected. "Why did you bring us to this house? Do you expect me to buy this for you as part of our divorce settlement?" Zane's voice carried a tinge of accusation. "Why would I need you to buy this house, Zane? This house is already mine," I replied calmly. The shock and disbelief etched on their faces hit me like a bomb. They regarded me with disbelief as if I were joking. Zane and his family seemed utterly unconvinced. "How on earth can you afford a house like this? You're renting, and your job isn't enough to cover this. Stop lying to us," Zane's father demanded, his tone sharp with suspicion. "I'm not lying, Zane. Remember when I mentioned that my parents left me some inheritance? Well, this is the house I was talking about. It's under a trust now, but I'll officially inherit it when I turn 30. I don't work a high-paying job because I have a trust fund waiting for me. That's impossible. Your parents passed away a long time ago. They should have let you have the house earlier," he insisted. "Well, you see, my parents were aware of the potential leeches I might attract, so they instructed me never to disclose the house or trust fund to anyone. Call it foresight, but they knew someone could exploit me. Hence, they placed everything in a trust to keep it safe until I reached 30. By then, I'd hopefully be settled with someone who genuinely cared about me, not my inheritance," I explained. "Oh my God, Claire, you should have told us about your wealth. We had no idea. This is a sizable house you have. We could all live very comfortably here," his mother said. "Yeah, you should have shared that sooner. We thought you were after our house. We could have avoided all the misunderstandings. I'd always known Claire was perfect for Zane. I've been saying she's a great woman. Look how wealthy she is." "Zane really found a great match," his father added. Their attitude toward me had shifted so rapidly that it made my head spin. What was even more bizarre was that they soon seemed to forget about the divorce filing. I took out the divorce papers and signed them. As I was saying, "Here's my signature for an uncontested divorce. You can just sign these to make it easy. If you want to fight, we can take this to court. I won't live with you anymore," I declared. "Claire, listen to me. There's no need to rush this. You've already proven you're not a gold digger. There's no reason to get a divorce anymore. We even apologize for any misunderstanding. That should make things better, right?" Zane pleaded. Yes, Michael is right. We're sorry, Claire. We doubted you for no reason," his mother chimed in. "I don't want your insincere apology, Zane. For 2 years, you allowed your family to berate me and label me a gold digger. I expected you to at least defend me, but no, you sided with them and accused me of being a gold digger as well. I won. Stay with someone who doesn't respect his wife. I'm done with you. We can part ways amicably or involve the courts. The choice is yours, Zane, I asserted. Molly and Michael tried their best to change my decision, pleading with me to let go of the past. In their minds, what happened was just a simple misunderstanding. Not once did they show remorse for tarnishing my name. Their audacity fueled my anger. When I reached my breaking point, I demanded they leave before I called the police. My anger intimidated them, and they left. Over the next few weeks, Zane and my in-laws continued to harass me daily. They begged, pleaded, and even offered bribes to convince me to stay. Their belief that I could be swayed with money only intensified my fury. It revealed that they still considered me motivated by financial gain. The irony was that as they co-owned the house with his parents, I was entitled to half of his share. This realization fueled their desperation for reconciliation. Despite their attempts, I remained steadfast in my decision to part ways. I relocated all my belongings to my parents' house, asserting my right to stay there even before officially taking ownership. Zane attempted to discuss matters at my workplace, but security was informed and asked him to leave. Zane still hadn't signed the divorce papers, holding out hope for a change in my decision. Nearly a year has passed since I initiated the divorce proceedings. With only a year or less remaining before the legal process concludes, I've managed quite well on my own, living independently. I found happiness and financial stability. While I've gone on dates, I'm not considering anything serious at the moment. According to a cousin of Zane's, they are apprehensive about paying me my entitled share of the house. Legal fees are piling up, and their savings are insufficient. Zane is even pushing for a sale, harboring resentment toward his parents for the upheaval in his life. At this point, I simply don't care and only want to be free from that toxic family.